Venezuela, a country blessed with vast oil reserves, found itself at a crossroads on July 28, 2024. The presidential election unveiled deep divisions. Nicolas Maduro sought to extend his rule amidst growing discontent. Edmundo Gonzalez carried the hopes of millions yearning for change. The results ignited a firestorm of controversy. The National Electoral Council declared Maduro the victor, but Gonzalez and his supporters cried foul. They alleged widespread fraud. The disputed results plunged Venezuela into a political crisis. Maduro was backed by the military. Gonzalez and a significant portion of the population were fueled by anger and a thirst for democracy. The stage was set for a showdown with consequences far beyond Venezuela's borders. Edmundo Gonzalez, a charismatic leader, refused to accept the election results. He accused Maduro's regime of rigging the vote, alleging manipulation at every turn. Gonzalez and his team presented what they claimed to be concrete evidence. The tally sheets from electronic voting machines were central to their case. They revealed discrepancies between the actual votes and the results announced.
Gonzalez called upon the Venezuelan people to denounce the electoral farce. He urged them to stand up for their rights and demand a recount.
The National Electoral Council, the body responsible for overseeing the elections, found itself at the center of the storm. Accused of bias and a lack of transparency, the CNE faced mounting pressure to address the opposition's claims. However, their response only fueled further suspicion. The CNE maintained that the election was conducted fairly and that the results were a true reflection of the people's will. They dismissed the opposition's allegations as baseless and politically motivated. However, their refusal to release detailed voting data, particularly the tally sheets from the electronic voting machines, raised serious doubts about their commitment to transparency.
The CNE's reluctance to address the concerns raised by the opposition and international observers only deepened the political crisis. It fueled the perception that the Maduro regime was attempting to cling to power through dubious means, further eroding public trust in the electoral process and the institutions meant to safeguard democracy.
Section 4. Global Concerns and Calls for Justice. The disputed election in Venezuela sent shockwaves across the international community. Governments and organizations expressed deep concern over allegations of fraud and the escalating crisis.
The United States, under the Biden administration, was among the most vocal critics. The US condemned what it called an assault on democracy in Venezuela. It called for a transparent recount of the votes. The US threatened further sanctions if concerns were not addressed.
The Organization of American States also voiced its concerns. The OAS called for an independent audit of the election results. The call for transparency was echoed by numerous countries and organizations. Section 5. Venezuela in turmoil, protests and uncertainty. The disputed election plunged Venezuela into a state of unrest and uncertainty. Protests erupted across the country, with opposition supporters taking to the streets to express their anger and frustration. They demanded a recount, the recognition of Edmundo Gonzalez as the rightful winner, and an end to what they perceived as Maduro's dictatorship.
The Venezuelan government responded to the protests with a heavy hand. Security forces were deployed to disperse demonstrators, and reports of violence, arrests, and human rights abuses surfaced. The government accused the opposition of inciting violence and attempting to destabilize the country, but the crackdown on dissent only fueled further anger and resentment.
As the protests continued, Venezuela teetered on the brink. The economy, already crippled by years of mismanagement and corruption, faced further turmoil. The political crisis deepened the humanitarian crisis that had gripped the country for years, with shortages of food, medicine, and basic necessities becoming even more acute.
Section 6. A future adrift. In the aftermath of the disputed election, Venezuela's future remained shrouded in uncertainty. The standoff between the Maduro regime and the opposition showed no signs of abating, with both sides entrenched in their positions. The international community, while united in its condemnation of the electoral process, seemed powerless to break the deadlock. The Venezuelan people found themselves trapped in a political and economic quagmire. Their hopes for a better future, for a return to democracy and prosperity, seemed to slip further away with each passing day. The specter of violence, instability, and further suffering loomed large over the country. The disputed election of July 28, 2024, marked a turning point in Venezuela's history. It exposed the fragility of the country's democratic institutions and the deep divisions within Venezuelan society. Whether Venezuela could find a path towards a peaceful and democratic resolution to its crisis remained an open question, a question that would determine the fate of millions.